Hello and welcome to the next installment of the How Do I Do Something in CloudBolt video series. My name is Mike Bombard. I'm one of the pre-sales cloud architects here at CloudBolt, and we're going to be covering a deep technical dive of a new subject today, which is going to be how do I build a custom dashboard in CloudBolt. So we're going to be talking through this and unpacking this use case. Again, this How Do I Do Something video series is a technical deep dive in CloudBolt. So the audience here is probably going to be more of the systems administrators or developers that are helping to support the CloudBolt system. So let's talk through the business value of this particular video. First of all, let's start with the challenge that we're hoping to solve as an outcome of this. So one of the challenges that we hear from our customers is it just isn't easy to see everything that's related to their cloud environments. They may have a number of different systems that are doing different things like monitoring to security to other systems that are just tracking state of the systems as they're being deployed inside of their cloud environments. And there's just not a good unified way of aggregating all of that information together. So in steps CloudBolt. So as the service catalog and effectively the endpoint where your customers can come to manage all of their cloud resources, we want to make it capable of being able to extend the product to talk to all of those different systems inside of your environment. So CloudBolt, one of the unique things about CloudBolt that I think is really cool is the ability to extend even the user interface, where you can take different components inside of the CloudBolt user interface and actually write new capabilities inside of CloudBolt in the place where it makes the most sense. So the element that we're tackling today is visibility. And really, visibility is the business value here is exposing visibility to systems across your enterprise. In this use case, we're actually going to be building a custom dashboard inside of CloudBolt, and that custom dashboard is going to be used to display some different information back to the end user. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so we're going to just unpack a little bit about dashboards in CloudBolt. The CloudBolt instance is really tailorable based on your specific use case. One of the things that I'll call out, I could just type in the dashboard extension here, and that would take me to the dashboard versus the catalog page. A lot of our customers' instances, by default, your default landing page is the dashboard. You'll notice that even when I click the CloudBolt or your enterprise logo that you may have uploaded as a part of a branded instance, in my instance, it actually doesn't go to the dashboard page. I've kind of set my default landing page to be the catalog page. So the first thing that I'm going to do before I start working with dashboards is I'm going to go over to our miscellaneous settings page. I'm going to go ahead and update that dashboard setting. You see our default redirect here. I'm going to go through and say we want this to go to dashboard, and that's going to take me back. Number one, it's going to reset that CloudBolt logo, as well as it's kind of our default dashboard. When we log into the system, that's where we end up going. So I just want to make sure there isn't another setting in here for catalog. So there's something that matches it, but maybe, oh, it's just the tab up top. So this has now been set, and I think I'm going to hit save one more time. It's saying that I need to restart the web server. I'm just going to validate that that is the case here real quick. Actually, I did not. So it's taking me right to the dashboard page now. So the dashboard page, there's a lot of dashboards that are available out of the box. This S3 bucket manager is not an out-of-the-box dashboard. This is something that I've imported into my instance from the content library, but it's effectively just a way to manage different S3 buckets inside of your environment that I have access to. So each of these dashboards should be controlled by a user's role, and based off of their role in their groups, they should have different visibility in these dashboards to the different components that they're working with. So one of the things we're going to work through as we build this dashboard out is the ability to constrain what each user of the group has access to. So we're going to be building that out as we work through this. We're not going to build the S3 bucket manager. We're going to build a completely new blueprint or a new dashboard that we're going to work through and show how to basically display group quotas. So if you'll notice here out of the box, we do have a groups dashboard here. It does show some information. I could go to the groups and see some more information about each of those groups. But really, I want to be able to display quotas as part of a dashboard here so that if I have quotas that are enacted inside of my environment, I get some real quick hit information as soon as I log into the system to see exactly where each of the groups that I have permissions to sit inside of the quota space. So we're going to build out a dashboard for that as we go through this, and we are going to show that quota information. Now, to be fair, we do show a lot of that under our Groups tab. So if I go to my Groups tab and I have visibility over the Groups tab, I can see the rate, the number of CPUs that are provisioned out of the quota. So the right-hand side of all of these is kind of our, this is our quota for the group. All of these in my environment are infinite. I don't have any quotas set. Why don't I just set a quota here and just show what that looks like? So my IT group, I'm just going to set a rate-based quota, and that's going to be, let's say, $500 a month. We don't want our IT group to spend more than $500 a month in cloud spend. So let's go ahead and save that. We can now see we have a $500 quota. We've used, at this point in the month, up to $120 worth of that quota. And I'm going to go back over to my overarching groups view, and we should also see that inside of the groups view as well. Here we go, $500. So we're basically going to bubble up the quota information for servers, rate, CPUs, memory, and disk, and really represent this information inside of a dashboard. And the reason that we want to do that is because in newer versions of CloudBolt, we have a new option under miscellaneous settings where non-privileged group users, we may not want to show them the group tab. So we can actually disable or enable, well, this show groups in top menu bar for all users. Hover over the tooltip here. It'll say, when disabled, users without the group.change attributes, global viewer, and or super admin permissions will not be able to see the groups link. So if they don't have permissions to manage that group, they're not going to be able to see the groups tab. They're only going to be able to order from the catalog. They can select the relevant groups that they want to order for in the catalog, but they're not going to be able to view and manage those groups and really get some good visibility into what the quota data is for each of those groups. So in this case, when we're hiding the groups tab, we may still want to allow our group members to be able to view that quota information, and we're going to represent that as part of a dashboard here. So this is a case of leveraging CloudBolt to automate CloudBolt processes. But as we go through this, this is not common to just CloudBolt. This could be us also making REST calls to an external system to pull in data that's relevant to the user or the system in the context that we're leveraging, and gathering that data and representing it back as part of a CloudBolt dashboard. So really, this is more of an art of the possible discussion, while we also show you the constructs needed to create a custom dashboard, as well as navigate the CloudBolt database model in a little greater depth. So let's go ahead and get started. So dashboards inside of CloudBolt are actually a component of what we call UI extensions, or XUIs, which is an XUI, literally meaning anything as a user interface. And this is one of the things that really makes CloudBolt unique, is the ability to display different data back inside of the user interface inside of CloudBolt that may not have been there out of the box. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a package here. So we can create a generic XUI package here that we can then start to develop against. So I'm going to create a package. I'm going to call this group quotas is my name. I'm going to just give it a database friendly name here. Dashboard to display all quotas for a user's groups. Okay, so I've given it a little bit of information here. Labels, I'm not really going to add a label, but I could add a label. You can think about this as kind of tags inside of the CloudBolt system, where maybe we label everything that has to do with our group quotas UI extension across the system, and then we could find them and identify them a little easier. The other thing that I'm going to do here is extension type. I'm going to select dashboard. There's a couple of different extension types so that we can create a skeleton inside of CloudBolt. In this case, we're just going to do the dashboard one. We get a little more help with some of these other types. The dashboard one's kind of empty, so we'll see that in just a second. But we're going to create a dashboard extension, and this is going to be the name of the ZUI that it's going to create. So let's go ahead and create that. This now creates that UI extension skeleton on the file system. So ZUIs, if you followed, we also have a 8-video series around creating a custom ZUI for an admin page that goes really far in depth with these. But ZUIs actually live on the file system of your CloudBolt appliance, and they live under a special directory in your CloudBolt appliance. I'm just going to clean all of this up here real quick. But they live under a special directory inside of CloudBolt. I am using my PyCharm as my integrated development environment here. So all of the content that I write from CloudBolt, I just kind of keep here. But this folder, or this directory in PyCharm, is mapped to my development instance of CloudBolt. So anything that I write in my IDE automatically gets pushed up to my CloudBolt server, and it puts it under a special folder, which is var opt CloudBolt ProServe and then ZUI. So I'm just gonna show that real quick. I'm gonna SSH into my CloudBolt server here, and I can just show this file path. So this is ZUI file path. If we just do an ls on the directories that are available here, we can see all of these directories that I also have mapped in my IDE. We can see all of those files here. Now you'll notice that I have this group quotas directory here. I do not have it yet in PyCharm. So the first thing I need to do is get those files over to my local development environment. And to do that, I'm going to create a directory and then sync the directory back from my CloudBolt server. So this is specific to PyCharm. If you're using VS Code, you can also use the SSH extension to develop directly on your CloudBolt appliance. I like that PyCharm kind of keeps the file separate, and it's just kind of how I got started with things here. But I'm going to create a folder called group quotas. So my new directory here, and then I'm just going to go through and do deployment. I'm going to sync with deployed. This then reaches out to my CloudBolt server, and it queries what files are different. There's only two. One's my init.py, one's my views file. So I'm going to go ahead and synchronize those over. And we can then see under group quotas, this now has a dot on it, which means that this is recognized as a Python module, and that's because this init.py file exists. Now, init.py for a ZUI, one of the first things I always do when I develop a ZUI is I start with this init.py file, and I'm just going to steal something from the last thing I was working on. But this allowed ZUI extensions. This is all documented in our documentation, but I think for a while I kept skipping over this, and I would run into where I'd go to export a ZUI, and I was missing things like HTML files or icons and logos, things like that. So one of the first things I usually do is I create this allowed ZUI extensions in my init file, and that tells the CloudBolt system that when we export this ZUI, we want to include all of the files that match these file extensions. So it's out of practice, it's one of the first things that I do. But I'm going to go ahead and save all. My init file is now set up. I can close it. There's probably not much else I'm going to do with it from here on out. And then we go into the views file. Like I mentioned, this is a skeleton. It's a really bare skeleton at this point. So we're going to go through the process of building out this dashboard. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with the method. I don't want to call this function 0. I do want to call this group quotas dashboard. Might be a good title for this. And I'm going to, the title itself, or the name of the dashboard, the title itself, though, I'm going to call it group quotas. This is going to be what the users are going to see inside of the dashboard page when they load this. And then the description is going to show on the dashboard as well. We'll see what we see when we get there. But go ahead, let that down a line. This @dashboard extension is a Python decorator. This is something we've declared inside of the CloudBolt system. Anytime you use this @dashboard extension, it tells the system that the next method function that we run across is the function that defines how we're going to build that dashboard. So That defines how we're going to build the dashboard. The next thing that I'm going to do is I need to get the group quotas data. So I need to, in CloudBolt, we need to take and create this view method. This view method is then going to feed into an HTML template that renders the data that we're passing into it. So I usually start by gathering my data first and putting it into a usable array that we can pass into an HTML template and parse through those things. I'm going to, again, it's just going to be a very simple list HTML file. I am by no means a front-end developer, so we're just going to make a pretty simple list as a dashboard here. But our views file, these are the methods that we're going to use to load our dashboards. It's expecting some information here. I'm actually going to, I don't know. So I'm going to take from other examples that I already have inside of the system as far as dashboards are concerned. We did see the S3 file manager dashboard that we had there. So I'm going to come in here and just take a look at what our dashboard extension looks like here. So this is the entire dashboard extension. I'm just going to copy the entire thing. This S3 file manager is available in the CloudBolt content library, so you could download that to your instance and use that as a starting point as well. But I'm going to go ahead and replace the content here and just start to switch things out inside of the way that we're building our dashboard. So get current user profile. So I do think I want to grab that because that's one of the things we need to do is pass in. We need to capture the user that is loading this dashboard because we want this to be controlled by the groups that the user should have access to. We don't want them to be able to view quotas for groups that they shouldn't have any business of viewing those quotas for. So, so let's check out that get your current user profile. I just want to see what they're doing in that S3 file manager. Current user profile. Oh, well, that's interesting. Okay, so that's a baked-in method in CloudBolt. And I'm just going to, in PyCharm, it's really good. It can look up some of your dependencies. So I'm going to right-click that. That's going to add the dependency at the top here. I don't need, so user profile.getGroups are the groups that we're a member of. So this is already doing a lot of the logic that I would usually do when building out a role-based access controlled mechanism. First thing I do need to do is get the group IDs. Or I don't know that I want the group IDs. I think I want the groups themselves. Yeah, I want the groups themselves. So I'm going to do, instead of group IDs, I'm going to do groups equals group for group in user profile.getGroups. So that should give me a list of all of my groups inside of CloudBolt. I don't need buckets or bucket names. I am going to want context here in a minute, but I'm going to delete the rest of this. And we'll talk through context and the template render, those kinds of things as we get down the line a little bit. But I also don't need resource types. So the next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to loop through for each group in groups, and you'll notice GitHub Copilot I am leveraging in my environment. I would highly recommend it. It's not perfect, but it starts to think through things here. And show you things as far as like what it thinks we should do. Like as an example, it wants to get the group buckets for each group. However, the reason that it's wrong here is because my description on my method is incorrect. So I'm going to update that real quick. I'm going to say display a list of group quotas in a CloudBolt dashboard widget. Perfect. Exactly what we want. We tab down a little further, it will also eventually give us our inputs, and it kind of spells those things out for us, but I'm going to go ahead and loop through all of my groups. So for group in groups, I then want to get group. It's not quite as simple as group.quota, so I'm going to actually launch into our Shell Plus. It's an interactive development environment. It's not an interactive development environment, but it allows us to interact directly with the database model inside of CloudBolt. And I can then go through and capture this information. So the first thing I want to do here is I want to figure out my IT group. If I hover over it, in the bottom left-hand corner, you should see that this IT group is the ID of 4. I could also go into the group itself and look at the URL. Notice that the ID of this group is 4. So I'm going to capture my IT group as the group that I'm going to be using to test. So I'm going to do group equals group.objects, and this is just querying objects in the database in Django. It's the terminology that we use. If we're getting a single object, we want to use the get command, or we could return multiple objects with a filter command here. And I'm going to do ID equals 4. And then I'm just going to print out my group, make sure I have the right group. There we go. We have my IT group. Then I can start in Shell Plus to actually tab through all of the things that are available on Shell Plus. So I could go through and view all of my properties for my group. I could view all of the methods that are available for this group. I think I actually have a quota set here, and this is what I want to view. So here's my quota set. You'll notice that this is it's an object inside of CloudBolt. And we can kind of see the information here. Notice a lot of these are infinity, so we're going to have to take an approach there to reference infinity. I also don't want to, let's just look at this quota set dot. We're going to go into CPU count, and then we want to do, here, let's just do this. So anything in Python that you want to view any of the published information about, you can do that __dict, and that's going to give you a printout of all of the values a lot of the values that are relevant. It's not always everything. But I can see in here, I think what I want to capture, though, is I want to use used, and I want to do limit. So I'm going to have a column for every single one of my components. Remember, we want to do all 5 of these. I'm going to have a column for each of these, and I want to tailor the data. So notice in our database, if I just print out total _ used, it's going to print this decimal with parentheses around that. We actually want to make this a little more user-friendly to read, so we're going to convert these values into an integer. So an integer is going to be a non-zero or a non-decimal pointed number. But we're going to convert these into an integer, or really into a string, but first convert it into an integer so that we're rounding that off to something that have nothing after the decimal point. And I'm also going to structure this so that it's kind of similar to the actual groups look, where it's we have the number of the used amount, and then we have a slash, and then we have the limit itself. And in this particular example, the only one of these that's going to have a limit is going to be, I believe it was for rate. We should see a limit for rate for this particular group. So the next thing that we want to do is start to construct a way to build out the group quota for each of these groups. I'm going to start by creating an empty array at the top, and we're going to structure the data for each of our groups to pass into this group quotas array. So why don't we do, I'm just going to take group quotas. This should be easy enough, and we're going to do group quotas append, and we're going to make this an object, and group.name. So we do want to show the name for each group. We could also include the group URL or the group ID, and we can build out the group URL to include a hyperlink. So why don't we do that as well? I don't think we need to make that group _name because we're referencing a, yeah, I guess that's okay. But anyway, we're going to do ID. We're going to do group.id, and we're going to test all of these in just a minute. Then we're going to do, I'm just going to match what they're called here. We're going to do _CPU _CMT, kind of, but not really. We'll build this out as we go. Mem size. Then we're going to do rate. Then we're going to do VM _CMT, group.VM CMT. And then we're going to kind of build out each of these objects in the array one at a time. So I'm going to test these one at a time. I'm going to do group.name. Okay, that works. That's exactly what we want to show the user. And we want to do group.id is 4. So we have our ID. Then we want to do group. Here's where it starts to get a little trickier. CPU underscore count. Doesn't work, right? So we need to go back to our quota set. Then we have CPU count. So that's one intermediary that we have to capture here. Quota set.cpu count. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to set, just to save myself some line space down here, we don't need to keep going back to the quota set, but we can do quota set equals group.quotaset. Set that once, and then we're using less when we're referencing each of those things. So we're going to reference the quota set for the group specifically. CPU, mem, rate, VM count. Am I missing something? I feel like I am. But there were 5. Disk size was the other one that I was missing. So, and it doesn't really matter the order that we're putting these in the array here. What matters for display purposes is the order that we make our columns in our HTML template. So we have these components now. That should be everything that we need. Now we do still need to build this out, but I'm going to set my quota set. I like to just copy this directly from my IDE and make sure that we're getting what we need. There's my quota set. And then I can do quota set.cpu count show, see what that shows. That's going to be the entire CPU count. But remember, we want limit. And infinity is going to be tricky because if I try and set that to an integer, it's going to give me an error. So we need to handle that overflow error. Just trying to think best way to do this. I'm going to set each of these individually. Just a little bit of string manipulation. Then these. Okay, so now we have a start. We're going to set our values up top, and then I'm going to reference those variables that we're setting up top. Trying to think through how best to add in our values. I may just do a set of try-catch loops because some of these are infinity and some of them are not. So I think for each of these values, let's build out assuming, so we know that the rate has the right thing. So let's start with our quota set.rate. And we don't want limit first, we want used. And we're going to set that to an integer. So this is what we should see is 119 is the current amount of spend for this particular quota. So we're setting that to 119. I'm also going to put this inside of an F string, which allows us to format this string literally inside of the brackets. We can do some additional manipulation, but also build the string out. I'm going to put a space between my two parameters. And I'm going to say, let's do, we're going to do another integer where we take in quota set.rate.limit. And then we're going to close our string, and this should give us, we're using $119 out of 500. So I think that's, I don't know that we need decimal places for this. I think that's perfectly suitable. So we're going to go ahead and do, actually, you know what? For quota set, I think what I'm going to do, I think that's all right. There are some mechanisms where if you're using internationalization and you have different currencies in your system, You could pull in the relevant currency for each of these. I'm not going to that particular example, pretty much because it's kind of irrelevant to what we're building. But for the right customer, that's probably what we would do, is build in the correct currency symbol in front of these. I could just do for rate, maybe I just do a $sign, and that's US dollars. And if you have a local currency, you can statically set it. But again, there are mechanisms in CloudBolt that would convert this to your region's local rate. But I, again, don't know how to do that offhand, so we're kind of going to leave that for maybe a different session. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this inside of a try block. And the reason that I'm doing that is I want to address the, and remember it was an overflow error. So that's the kind of error that we're addressing this for. But for an overflow error, I want this to be maybe not applicable, right? I could do it, I'd have to look up the infinity sign syntax for HTML. I'm just going to do NA for now, just meaning not applicable. That tells me that this does not have a limit set for rate. So just a way to handle that if we were to run into it for that particular use case. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start to build this out for quota set. Or nope, not quota set. We need quota set for CPU count. And then quota set CPU count. And it's really, actually, you know what, we can just kind of go through and paste this. I'm going to put this on a separate line, so just split those two lines. And then I'm going to do my accept and CPU count equals quota set CPU used. Actually, we're going to get rid of the $signs here. We don't want dollars for CPUs, and we can actually get rid of CPU count. Now what I can do is I can say, and it's going to start looking at these, and again, this is all GitHub Copilot. It's kind of taking what I'm writing, and because it understands language, it's making an assumption that we're trying to do similar handling for these other types. So this should work here. And if we go down to, let's do try, give it a little kick. There we go, VM count should give us that VM count, except overflow error. And then the last one's going to be a try for disk size. And since we have all of that in here, we should be able to set all of these. I should be able to copy, oh, I didn't do my accept for disk size. That's one of the, would highly recommend some IDE, doesn't really matter which one, but it told me there was a red line at the end of this because I did not put an accept statement after a try statement. So it helps a lot when you're trying to correct syntax or just really development in general. So I'm going to just copy this whole try block. I'm going to paste it into my Shell Plus window. Make sure they're all lined up on the same line. If not, it's going to complain about funky indents. I can then hit enter. And what I should be able to do is I can say disk underscore size, and I can test that. So that should be correct. You know what I didn't do, and what I'm noticing here, I didn't recognize that. I thought my CPU count, I had the integer set. So on the overflow errors, we do need, and this is why debugging is very, very important. It still needs to be an integer on our overflow errors where we're capturing these. So integer, 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 integer. Then we're going to close the parentheses on each of those. Make sure our red lines are gone. GitHub Copilot only understands what it has context for. So, yep. So that's why it kept going down the line, trying to do the same thing that I did in the first example, and it was wrong, so it repeated the same thing over and over again. Anyway, back down to the bottom, I'm going to copy this again and make sure that this looks correct in my Shell Plus window, and then we can move on with building out our use case. Disk underscore size. Now we see it's 304 instead of 304 and 100 zeros behind it. Let's just check our VM count. Let's check our rate. There we go. See the dollar signs that are placed into that string. Mem size and CPU count are the last two. And then CPU underscore count. There we go. So we have all of the data that we need for this group now. And again, since this is appending here at the bottom, it's going to add all of them into my group quotas array. And this group quotas array can be used for what we call, we're going to use it inside of our context. So like I mentioned, we're going to get into context here. Context in CloudBolt is the information, or excuse me, really context inside of Django, because we're Django under the covers. We're using a Django template to render this dashboard that we're attempting to make. So we're going to pass this data for the group quotas into the HTML template that we're going to build here in just a minute. We're going to use that to capture or pass the information that we're going to show to the user in the dashboard. Now remember, just as a reminder, because we're using the user profile and we're getting the groups directly from the user profile, this is going to only show groups that I have permissions to. You know, the other thing that I did want to do in here, because I'm not going to handle pagination in this current iteration, but I do want to limit I do want to set a limit on the number of groups that we're going to show in this dashboard. If not, in some environments, this could get to be quite long. But I'm going to set this as a global variable. The reason that I do that is if I ever want to change this, I can come back to the top. Or if I just want to iterate on this at some point in the future where I include pagination as part of the dashboard visibility, I can do that. But I'm going to say groups limit. Let's say so group number equals 1. And then the bottom here, after I've appended that to the list, I want to do group number plus equals 1. I want to say if group number is greater than group's limit, which means that at the end of the 10th iteration, it's going to iterate to 11. And if it's over, we want to break the loop. So we don't want to allow it to continue capturing any more than 10 groups here. So, and again, this is variable driven, so we could change this. I could also say, it may not work for a dashboard, but for other use cases in CloudBolt, I could put double curly brackets around something that says groups underscore limit, and it would create a variable that we can pull in. I don't think that works for a dashboard, though. I don't know that we can pull in parameterized information for it. I could be wrong. Anyway, we're going to pass our group quotas in here. Here's the data that we'll use in our template. We're going to break after 10 groups. Here's our context that we're going to use, and this is just the data that we can reference from our HTML template. And then we're going to return a render. And the render really, here there's 3 things that we're taking in. Number 1 is the request. Our request is coming from the group that's loading this, or the user that's loading this dashboard is going to send a request on the back end to this method. We're going to pass that request over. We're also going to take in the name of a template file. And notice right now it's S3 File Manager. I'm going to go ahead and do, what is my group underscore quotas. And then I'm going to have templates. And then we could just leave it as widget.html. That's perfectly fine. Yeah, that's all right. So we're going to create that information now. We're going to create a new directory. We're going to call it templates. And then we're going to create a new file in here. We're going to call it widget.html. I don't want to add that to Git yet. I will later. Now, our widget.html file, this is we're going to build out our template to display the dashboard. Now, I already have I already have a default, a template that I've been working with. I usually go back to the last thing I did just because I'm most familiar with it. I've been working with it most recently. I'm going to take in this sample as something to start with. I am not an HTML guru, so I'm going to use something to help me get started. You could also pull in, you know, that S3 file manager as a default, or any dashboard type content from our content library, and use that to get you started. But at the end of the day, I don't know that I need all of this, so I'm pretty sure I can get rid of everything. I'm going to get rid of this first div. I know that I don't need this. I don't need this export multiple button here. So I'm also not looking for content, so I want to get rid of that because that's an if statement that's going to, yeah, so I'm going to shift everything back one tab. So now I have a list of CloudBolt. And so this is going to be a title for this. Let's say CloudBolt group quotas, and we'll see what this looks like. Maybe this is too much. We can always remove this if we need. I could also put some headers here like strong. And then and strong. So that's going to make this a little more bold. Again, I might not like that when I get into this. Now I'm going to create my table. That table is going to have some rows. The first row is going to be my headers, so my columns. So the first thing that I want to do here in my, I'm just going to take this in, I'm just going to copy my table header here. The first column is going to be group name. And then we have 5 things that we wanted to display. Actually, in PyCharm, I just learned the other day, is I can do a Control D, and that copies it. 4, 5, 6. So now we can come in, we're going to do group name, we're going to do CPU / limit. Memory / limit. And I might not like this when I get in there, but we'll see. CPU memory disk / limit. Servers / limit. And you could put this in whatever order works for your organization. Then I'm going to do rate / limit. So these are the headers for my table. The next thing I'm going to do, this has a little more information in here than I really need. Double curly brackets. So actually, let's change, make sure I don't have any other filters in here. So we're going to go through, we need to create a loop because remember, we're passing over our context, which includes an element called group quotas. So I'm going to go back over to my widget and I'm going to loop through my group quotas for each group quota in group quotas. We're going to do group quota, and then we're going to do dot name. And then I'm going to see, hopefully GitHub Copilot catches on. No, it's not smart enough. It's not looking at my other file. So I'm just going to copy this. Maybe after the first one it'll catch on. Probably not because each of these are different. There's my CPU count, so we're going to match the CPU. Then we're going to do another one. We're doing mem size, I believe. So just copy from my other file. And then do rate. Nope, rate's not next. Rate's going to be last. So we can knock that down a line. Disk and servers are what we need. So disk size, and here's where I mentioned earlier we could put our dictionary entry here in whatever order we want. What matters is how we reference that data or display it inside of the table. Sometimes it makes sense to just keep both in the same order. That way you can kind of go down the line. But really, at the end of the day, if you if you're paying attention, it really doesn't matter. So here's our for loop. So this is Django templating, where we can loop through each of those group quotas, and for each of them we're going to create a new table row, and in that table row we're going to create 5 pieces of data. Now the other thing I wanted to do, we have the group quota.name. Remember we talked about the hyperlink earlier. So I'm going to do an href equals, I don't remember what this URL is for groups. I'm going to pull that up here in just a second. And then I can do /a just to end it. But this is my table data here is going to be my group name, but the group name should include a hyperlink. I believe, if I recall correctly, this should be something like URL. And we're going to reference the URL. So I'm going to pause for just a minute and capture that. I don't remember exactly where that info is, but I have it somewhere pretty handy, and we'll be back in just a second. Okay, so I'm fairly sure that this is what it's going to look like. We have a URL helper in CloudBolt that's called group_detail. It could also be group_edit. I'm not quite sure. Now, they may not have permissions, again, if this is a non-privileged user, to view those groups. So maybe we don't even want to allow this. Actually, now that let's leave this. This is a good example of how to do a URL link inside of CloudBolt in an HTML template. So we'll leave this for now, but I think what we'll ultimately end up doing is maybe removing this if we were to release this. But we have this built out for our first column, so we're not going to save this. And I think we're really ready to go ahead and test everything. Could be wrong. Let's find out what happens. So the first thing I want to do inside of my SSH session here is I'm going to cancel out of Shell Plus. And I'm going to restart HTTPD. So systemctl restart HTTPD. Once things have refreshed, it's done now. I'm going to go ahead and head back over to, let's go to my dashboards page. Let's just see what happens. This takes a minute after an Apache restart to respond in a reasonable amount of time. There we go. Dashboard is loading. It's a good start. It means the entire page didn't fail. Let's check out our dashboard. And hopefully this is a first time one and done kind of deal. Groups quota dashboard. So our name isn't quite right, so we'll get to that. We'll fix that. Okay, so it does not like something. So has no attribute function 0. So there's, I think as part of the, I'm going to restart Apache one more time because it almost to me looks like it did not pick up our UI extension like it should have. It's still looking for that old function 0. So group quotas. Okay, so this is updated here, but our dashboards page isn't quite loading properly yet. I was working with a coworker on this exact same dashboard yesterday. It was the same thing. It was just weird behavior. I just want to see how this is functioning now. There we go. Hey, look at that. So it's showing my first 10 groups. You can see all the usage information. My IT group's really the only one in this instance that's using that for now, but you can see my CPU, you can see my limit. Notice that the only one we have limits for here is our rate group. But now we have a table. The only thing I'm really unsure of here, I actually don't need CloudBolt group quota. So I'm going to delete that real quick. And let's test this while I'm here too. The group link, I'm going to see if we can launch to get to our group. Hey, that group link works. So it takes me right to my group details. So I can view the information about the group directly from the dashboard. So the hyperlink worked. And I'm just going to get rid of that CloudBolt group quotas. And I think we're pretty much done at this point. A couple other things I'll show, but let's get rid of our, that's really here where we have this additional header. We'll get rid of that. I don't really think we need, I don't know if we need a panel default or a panel body or any of that extra stuff. I think a lot of it's just some additional filter that we may not really need, but again, not the HTML guy. Let's go ahead and refresh. We should see our CloudBolt group quotas go away. There we go. Now, the one of the things I will point out here, the default width of a CloudBolt dashboard is full screen width. However, we make it really handy. Each of your users can set up preferences around which dashboards they want to use inside of CloudBolt. And they can use the little toggle here to either manage their displayed widgets, where we now see our group quotas dashboard as an option here. We could remove it from our view or add it to our view if it's not something that's always included. The other thing that we could do is move and resize widgets. And what's really handy here is I'm not a big fan of full screen width dashboards, so I'm probably going to end up reducing this down to match the size of my other dashboards. You'll see that even squished together a little bit, it's still visible. I think that this still shows well. Or, maybe I wanted to do something that's a third of the screen, and then maybe my environments view, I wanted to shrink down a little bit to get them both kind of on the same level. I don't want to make it shorter, but maybe, there we go. So you can change and customize your dashboard's view inside of CloudBolt to match each user's preferences. I'm not sure if I dragged that right, or maybe drag it right over next to this and then drag it outwards to get things reset. So finished moving and resizing. Now, every time I go to my dashboards page, I'm going to be presented with my group quotas. Again, the big use case here is not just quotas or things inside of CloudBolt, but the ability to extend to literally any system inside of your environment that caches information that is relevant for your user in the context of your cloud environment. So the ability to display things, you can include things like bar charts or graphs and things along those lines like we have with some of the system dashboards. This is a really, again, the S3 bucket manager is kind of cool. I could download files from a selected S3 bucket directly from this dashboard. I can upload files. I can manage everything that S3 bucket does directly from my dashboard view. This also is a tab view that we have inside of the resource itself. But anything that you can do inside of a UI or with an HTML template, you can do with these dashboards. And all of these things that we're showing here are all part of the art of the possible as far as how you might want to display data back to your end users. So again, just a very simple table view here today. You can do some additional things like filters and things like that on your tables, or allow your users to move columns around. That starts to get a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but it is all of the part of the art of possible with CloudBolt. And one of the other things I will call out here, this could be done by your team. If your team understands a little bit of Python, a little bit of HTML, this wasn't a bad process. I think we're at about 50 minutes now to get a dashboard into the system. Or this could be something that we can help with from a professional services aspect and helping you build out these use cases to get you across the line. There's a lot of different options. We also have some professional training options to help build up skill sets in these areas. But if you have any additional questions or just want to chat with our team a little deeper and talk about some of these use cases in more detail, please reach out to your account executive, and we would be more than happy to help out and help point you in the right direction. So thanks again if you've made it this far, for making it through the entire video. If you have any additional ideas for additional things that you would like to see how to do in CloudBolt, please also let your account team know, and we're always looking for good ideas to put additional use cases together. So thanks again. Hope everyone has a great day and appreciate your time.